Welcome, my friends, to the world of HeroQuest, a place unlike any other. And today, we're traveling 40,000 years into the future, where the Space Marines are foremost among the defenders of humanity. Buckle your power armor and prepare for a warp jump straight into retro sci-fi glory. Ever dreamed of blasting orcs, squashing gene stealers, and generally making a galactic mess? Well, grab your dice and get ready for Space Crusade. We're diving deep into the dusty archives of 1990, where Milton Bradley and Games Workshop spliced together this legendary board game. It's the brainchild of the brilliant Stephen Baker, and trust me, this game is a blast from the Warhammer past that still packs a punch. You'll be commanding squads of legendary Space Marines, the Ultramarines, the Blood Angels, and the Imperial Fists, each with their own unique style. One of you will take on the role of the Alien Overlord, unleashing hordes of monstrous creatures and playing devious alien event cards to thwart the Marines' mission. It's a battle of cunning and firepower, a dance of dice and strategic brilliance. We're talking corridor crawls, door breaches, and epic close-quarter brawls. Will you risk it all for the mission, or play it safe and survive? Every roll of the dice can change the tide of battle. Complete missions, rack up kills, and climb the ranks. Earn new equipment, unlock special orders, and become a legendary commander. So grab your minis, dust off your dice, and join us as we explore the retro awesomeness of Space Crusade. Will the Marines conquer the Space Hulk, or the Alien Overlord reign supreme? This is the Fair Weatherman. Welcome back to the channel. Get ready for a serious dose of retro gaming. I finally snagged the last of the famous trio of war games produced by the legendary Stephen Baker. It's a dream come true to add this hidden gem to my collection. A little over a year ago, I picked up a copy of the Avalon Hill re-release of HeroQuest, and since then, I started a quest that not only progressed forward, but most excitedly, brought me backward. To discover vintage dungeon crawlers that I owned as a child and many that I did not. Games like the classic HeroQuest, Advanced HeroQuest, Battle Masters, and now Space Crusade. This isn't just any board game, folks. It's a glorious mashup, a cosmic collision of two legendary forces in the 90s, Milton Bradley and Games Workshop. Think of it as a delicious blend of dungeon crawling and Space Marine mayhem. This all started when my son and I decided to take a trip down to our local Warhammer store to pick up some paints and have a look around at Skaven minis and Space Marines. I didn't realize so much of current Citadel miniatures can fit nicely into Advanced HeroQuest, HeroQuest, and Space Crusade. And there are a lot of varieties in the 28mm size. Things like Skaven from the Age of Sigmar and the Horse Heresy Space Marines that have a very neat retro look. It was there that we saw a paint station, and my son got super excited to grab a Space Marine and start painting. But this really got me and him interested in painting, and since then we've been on a painting journey to go through some of our 3D printed miniatures and start painting them up. And so you'll see a future video of all of my proxy minis that I have to incorporate into Advanced HeroQuest. Here are just a few: my Rad Ogre, a Troll, and a really cool Skaven. So stay tuned for that video. I have a few more minis I need to paint up before I can release it, but I'm real excited about this new part of my journey of board gaming. As I walked around the store, I really found myself drawn to the displays of the classic Warhammer minis. I'm not an expert on Warhammer, but I believe that they were from the second edition of Warhammer. I do like the way that these minis were classically painted in the style that Games Workshop gave us on the box art of Advanced HeroQuest and Space Crusade. The bright aesthetic really draws me in, and that's one thing I really want to work on when I start painting. I left that store and realized I gotta have one. So I took to eBay and found someone in Ireland who had a complete and near perfect edition of this game. This wonderful box I'm about to open is not something that I even knew about back in the day. This gem was kept a secret, but never had a stateside release. But here it is in all its glory. Let's get into this. You can see a lot of influences pulled from the sci-fi movie genre like RoboCop and Aliens throughout the artwork and the minis. So looking closely, you can see that this looks like an alien's xenomorph head. You can also tell here on the gene stealers as well. This game, like HeroQuest before it, included the instructions on how to assemble everything inside of the lid of the game box. A real clever way to include basic instructions on how to get started without having to thumb through the instruction guide. Many Warhammer enthusiasts admit that Space Crusade was advertised as an introductory Warhammer in a box. Now, unlike other board games of its time, Space Crusade didn't have a traditional game board, but instead it came with these 4 game tiles that, depending on the quest, would be structured differently on the table. Just like HeroQuest, I do appreciate all the effort that went into the artwork on the game board. 30 years later, many people have noticed as they pick up this game that a lot of these game tiles have been warped, and luckily the version I had does not appear to have any water damage or any issues with them laying flat on the table. The other thing that makes this game really unique is the addition of these 4 walls. These would be created on the board with little plastic pieces that would connect them to give a 3D element to the game board for better immersion. All of these pieces are standard artwork throughout, but do give a really cool appearance of battles that might have taken place within the Space Hulk. And what's also really nice is that these doors fit perfectly within the opening of the walls. Another similar element to HeroQuest was the addition of the Aliens GM screen. And this is really neat because it does have all of the different characters and their stats and how you go about using them. The dice they would roll to fire, the hand-to-hand combat, their armor values. And I really do like how it does appear to be a control panel, sticking with the classic sci-fi theme. The scanners for our hero characters are made out of a really cheap candy plastic. And so I am also grateful that all of these are intact. At first glance, they are similar, but what makes them different is the addition of the tile pieces that allow you to mark your hero's point values. You have one for the Imperial Fist, the Ultramarines, as well as the Blood Angels. All just creating a better immersion within the universe of Space Crusade. Next we have the docking tiles. These docking tiles are what you would then connect to the game board with as your ship would attach to the Space Hulk, and your Marines would then enter, recovering things in the mission like special weapons, eliminating specific alien monsters, and then making your way back to your ship by these docking tiles. Similar to returning back to the staircase in the dungeons of HeroQuest. Each hero player will also have their corresponding Marine cards, explaining all of the weapons that you can equip your Marines with, as well as their movement, their commander's movement, and then their commander's advanced weaponry like the bolt pistol and power axe, the power glove and power sword, as well as the heavy bolter, thus making your commander different on the board and giving him the use of these more powerful weapons. All right, now let's get to the cards. Another fantastic addition from Milton Bradley and Games Workshop is the artwork. That's very telling of the time period. So as you can see, we have the Alien event cards, really cool hand-drawn art with a fair balance of Alien events as well as bonuses for heroes. So not every card is going to be a negative effect on our heroes. Booby trap. Hey Gretchen, where are you going? I'm setting booby traps. What? I'm setting booby traps. Oh, you mean booby traps. That's what I said, booby traps. It's great. Look at this one. How cool is this? A suicide android. Anyone android may self-destruct after moving. Roll 2 heavy weapon dice. Each Marine adjacent to the android is attacked with a total of 2 dice. That's just awesome. I love it. I love the sci-fi universe of this dungeon crawler. Each group of Space Marine heroes also have a handful of their own cards that allow the hero players to equip at the start of each mission. So you have order cards that will be specifically designated to your characters throughout that mission. You have advanced weaponry and equipment, and I believe each one of these factions are slightly different, making it all the more unique. Now, I don't know enough about the game to be able to tell you if one is more equipped in hand-to-hand combat versus attacking from a distance. That's something I'll just have to figure out as my son and I get in here and start to play. What's interesting is the front and the back of the cards have slightly different information on how to go about equipping these cards into play, as well as a slight different change of artwork. Something that I really do appreciate. All right. Now to our bag of blips and tokens. As soon as I got my hands on this box and opened everything up, I was sure to go through and count up all these blip tiles and tokens. And surprisingly, every single one of them was here, which makes me extremely happy. So how the blip tiles work is slightly different than, say, HeroQuest, where all of the monsters are already predetermined. The alien player in Space Crusade has the certain amount of blip tokens that they can then play throughout the mission, and they are all slightly different. And so depending on the mission, they will tell you which of these alien characters they can include, and then the alien player gets to determine when they want to play them. What's also neat about Space Crusade is that you can move these blips before they're actually revealed. Our hero players wouldn't necessarily know what's underneath them, but we can move these around the board and open doors, move from room to room, and prepare for them to turn a corner and ambush them if we wanted to. Which I think makes this game unique in that aspect compared to HeroQuest. All right, here are our game dice, our brutal game dice, to be honest. Oftentimes you're rolling and nothing's happening, but when bolter fire lands, it's fun to just destroy that opponent.
What?
You have white dice for weapons that aren't as powerful, and you have some red dice for the more powerful bolters and long-range weapons, missile launchers. And each set of heroes, depending upon how they're equipped, would be able to roll different sets of dice. So in classic Games Workshop fashion, you have a rulebook with fantastic hand-drawn art throughout. I do like that there is an inclusion of a lot of the lore underneath each photo. There was a lot of artwork that I did find interesting enough to explain more of the backstory of what's going on, why the Space Marines are going and attacking and carrying missions out on these Space Hulks. There's that really classic RoboCop mech that we see in the game. You also have the mission book. There's 12 missions included within the game. That continues the backstory. I know Banjo has released some rules on how to play solo, and so I'm going to try to incorporate that so my son and I both can be Marines and have an automated alien player. I'm going to do a bit more digging and see if there are a bunch of missions that people have created for this and I can maybe get my hands on. All right, before we get onto the minis, I do want to show you the handful of doors that you get in the game. Here are the doors that the Space Marines will enter the Space Hulk with. They do clip on the board with these little plastic clips, but I'm just so leery about tearing these cardboard docking tiles. I just don't want to tear any of the artwork up on the doors or or any of the tiles, but all these doors are slightly different. I did notice on the back of the box that the doors that were in the picture had numbers on them, and this release didn't have them. I'm sure there was some slight variations of the game. One thing that my son noticed as we were setting up to play for the first time last weekend, he pointed out, "Dad, this game smells funny." And I said, "What does it smell like, buddy?" And he says, "It smells like an antique store." And there's something about these games as they've aged. They just have that library, old book smell. I guess it's all the cardboard. It's probably a fair bit of mold and dust that's gathered for 30 years. I still think it smells pretty good because it reminds me that this is a vintage game and it should be treated with respect and played. I told myself I never want to buy games and just put them on the shelf, and so if I'm going to spend the money on a game, I want to make sure that we get in there and we play it. Space Crusade comes with a massive amount of finely detailed Citadel miniatures, 15 Marine figures, and 35 alien monsters, all anxiously awaiting their battle on the Space Hulk. I think I mentioned this in my HeroQuest unboxing, but I love the sound of this plastic. That's how you know you have a classic vintage game. Each faction comes with 4 standard Marines and 1 commander, as well as a slew of weaponry that you can attach and change out on your troops. So here are your 3 factions of Space Marines. Our Ultramarines, our Imperial Fists, and we have a commander here for the Blood Angels. One thing that I have seen people do is magnetize the weapons to be able to pop on and off. And I do think that's a fantastic idea. So they would go about dribbling a small hole and dropping in the smallest magnet and allow these things to pop on and off with ease. It's probably wise because every time I pop this off, I do feel like it's just on the verge of easily being snapped. But what a wonderful figure. Like I said earlier in the video, when we went to the Warhammer store, I did notice that the Space Marines that they had painted up inside the cabinets were close to this size, but I think if I remember reading online that these are a little bit shorter and stubbier than the ones that they received in 2nd edition of Warhammer. Looks like these figures do need a little bit of a cleanup before I paint them, but on the shoulder armor, I do like that the commander has spaces to add some decaling. I would really like to try to paint this in an aesthetic that's bright and colorful and not one that's grim and dark. I think my Advanced HeroQuest figures so far are going to be more of a grim dark style, and I do like the idea of this being bright and colorful with the highlighting techniques that they used in the 90s at Games Workshop. Alright, on to probably the most interesting and fun mini in the box is the Dreadnought. So what's cool about this figure is that the weapons can also be exchanged and attached in different configurations, and from what I can tell, as this miniature gets blasted by Space Marines, they'll lose weaponry, eventually knocking out its ability to attack, forcing it to do hand-to-hand combat, which I would imagine is just stepping on a Space Marine. This miniature can be built fairly easily. My son took it out of the box, and without even looking at the inside of the top cover, he figured out how to put it together and was just amazed at the size of the miniature once it was completely built. Interestingly enough, the Mission Dreadnought expansion has a taller Dreadnought in it, as well as another one of the standard Dreadnoughts that you receive in the box set. Here we go, most exciting part for me. Is looking at all of these cool alien minis. So what stands out right now to me is the Android / Necron. Really cool futuristic skeleton sculpt. I did see someone recently on the Space Crusade Reddit page post a picture of a really neat metallic android with pink, which I thought was really interesting and fun and would fit the cool 80s, 90s vibe of this game. I would probably default to painting them up as they are on the box, but I did find that that was really interesting that someone picked that color scheme, and one that I felt like could work. We also have the addition of the Chaos Commander and the Chaos Marine, one being more intricately designed than the other. These weapons do pop off, but they didn't include any extras that I had remember seeing, and so you pretty much just could glue them on or magnetize them on and not take them off, unless you wanted to change up your commander with a different weapon, but you can easily just equip them with the standard heavy bolter and be good. But I do like the really cool intricate design of this figure, and like I said before, you can see a lot of influences from Aliens. We also have 3 of these cool Gene Stealers. When we were at the Warhammer store, I did strike up a conversation with someone in there. I mentioned Gene Stealers, and he did say that there is a more current faction within the Warhammer universe that came from the Gene Stealers, where they went in and literally created like a new species of humans. And so you have a humanoid version of the Gene Stealer right now, as well as a slightly different alien monster. But like I said before, you can easily purchase those figures and drop them into this game, and they would fit right alongside this aesthetic. What's also fun is that the orcs came equipped with different weaponry. So you can see there's 2 slightly different bolters on these 2 figures. So when you go about painting them up, I can imagine you can really get carried away and just making these guys unique. I also like on some of the painted artwork on the box that they did add some really cool artwork on the shoulder armor, thus telling maybe a different story of each one of these orcs and how they got to the Space Hulk and maybe their rank. I don't know if you can see it, it's real small, but I do like the detail of the bolter and the different smiley faces and skulls that are added. They could have easily given us multiple versions of the same sculpt, but I can appreciate the thought that went into making these orcs different, as well as the Gretchen, creating each one with a slightly different weapon. I believe my favorite one out of the bunch of Gretchen is this really cool traditional rifle that this one has. The Fair Weatherman in the future. I'm thrilled to be able to add this game to my vintage board game collection, completing my quest to recover all of the vintage games that Stephen Baker had a hand in when he worked for Milton Bradley in conjunction with Games Workshop. Getting my hands on this game, I can tell it was really well loved, and I'm so grateful that the previous owner had taken care of it and was kind enough to pass it on to new fans. You can tell by the artwork on this box the passion that Games Workshop had in creating these board games, going as far as to include how to go about painting them up and recreating what they have envisioned in the process of making this game. Who knew that 35 years later, these pictures would continue to inspire people to pick up a paintbrush and learn how to paint for the first time. Now, if we can only find a way to encourage Games Workshop to release a newer version of Warhammer Light in a box. Well, that's all I have for y'all today. Please stay tuned for more HeroQuest content as I continue to add more board games to the channel. As always, your very survival depends on your ability to work together, for no true hero stands alone. Come, let the quest begin.